In this video, we talk with John from Ullman Sails about downwind sails. We look at white sails versus kites and how the technology has evolved for furlers used by Code Zeros and gennackers. And I'm here with John from Ullman Sails UK. Okay, let's get back to the Yankee. You mentioned we talked about pulling it out, right? What's your idea about twin headsail if you have two similar sized Yankees?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that's becoming over the last few years. There's definitely becoming a conversation that is more and more talked about, and you're hearing more and more people doing it. The big plus of it, or I see for an interesting. I think it's come about more because of the newer boats which are out here, the big masts. A lot of them are swept back spreader rigs, so spreaders aren't in line, they're back. So of course, when you're running downwind, you put the mainsail out, so you're sitting against spreader. I mean, you're doing across the Atlantic, and stuff like that. That's a massive amount of chafe, damage, things like that, And then if you've got to pull the sail in to keep it off, the whole thing just is really awkward. And so I think that's where it's really sort of built ahead of steam now. The plus side of obviously doing it, mainsail down, that's great. You like yourself, you'll have preventers and all that sort of. But again, you've got a mainsail down. It's not in the way. You've not, all of the sail is up front. That's great for downwind sailing because that makes the boat very balanced as well. As you said, by having two of relatively similar same size sails, as we've talked about with the main and the Yankee already, but two similar size sails up at the front makes a really balanced, sailing. As I said, you've got your poles; it's all nicely locked off. And as I said, if you've got that lined up with the furler, it's also a very easy way of getting rid of the sails. If a squall comes through or this, that, and the other.
Right.
So in all of that aspect, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've seen some quite interesting things over the last year and a half. Because Code Zeros and things like that have come very much again into this front because of the fact that the boats that are being built now generally have all got small jibs and very big mains. But I've got pictures of a couple of customers who've basically taken their mainsail down. They got their jib poled out one side, and they've poled their Code Zero out onto their boom on the other side. And so it's the same kind of idea, a little bit unbalanced, but still works really, really well. And I think more than anything else, just saving the chafe and the wear on mains and stuff nowadays, it's a really good idea, and once you're set up, it's a very, very stable platform, hopefully, for you to sail across.
Yes, because we're planning a circumnavigation with time, and we'll be most likely sailing shorthanded, right? So we're looking at just Natalie and me, right? So we're looking at some downwind sails for. Well, you need downwind sails, right? So twin sail was one of them we were looking at, or an asymmetric spinnaker in a sock, or a gennaker.
Yeah.
So, what is your preference?
All three, of course. but you knew I was going to say that. It's a really interesting one. I think personally, when you're going across the Atlantic, like you did last time and stuff, when the breeze is up, and you got your 20 knots of breeze, and you're going across the Atlantic, poled out, dead downwind type sort of sailing, absolutely. Poled out Yankee main out the side, or two headsails wing over the asymmetric, probably absolutely fine, especially shorthanded, because it's the whole thing's locked off, isn't it? You're not anything flapping around type of thing. You got your poles are locked off. You got so it's a really, really simple for shorthanded. Once you set, as you said, if the wind's coming up, you can just pull the furler and wind the things away. And so for that breezier condition stuff, absolutely, I think winging and stuff like that is really good. And as I said, the comments you've already made about the Yankee, that all falls into that shorthanded category. I think what I would say is if you're going to sail with a Yankee, you don't have the Genoa. I think interestingly, you've got two sails really that basically sort of fit into anything sailing off the wind. And if you're only sailing with the Yankee, on the boat, you've then either got your cruising code 0, gennaker, or whatever you want to call it, and you have your asymmetric. The cruising code 0 is actually a really simple sail generally to use shorthanded. It's become very popular with shorthanded sailing, because to furl it up and everything is relatively easy. It sort of furls around its own stay. You can put it up and down, you can furl it away, and it's quite a docile sail. It gives you the area to keep you moving along, which you may be missing from not having your genoa. But it's lighter, obviously, so it flies nicer. And also the fact is, you sort of can sheet it off, and as long as you've got it relatively trimmed, you can sort of sail sort of 20 degrees that way, 20 degrees that way. The sail doesn't collapse; it behaves itself nicely. So it's a really docile sail in the way. But when you've got that nice sort of lighter conditions, when you're not sailing with the Yankee, but you want to sail, you don't want to use the engine. It means you can just sail, and so. It's a really, really useful sail. To build them in spinnaker cloth. I'm very much of the opinion if you're going to have a code 0 type sail, you build it out of what we call a code 0 laminate, which is it's a little bit stronger, does the job, and then that gives you, it's a very versatile sail. I mean, you can use it in 20 knots of breeze. It's not like you can't. I mean, they're immensely strong, but it just gives you that sort of area where if you get a bit docile with the size of having the Yankee up, as you come off the wind, you've got yourself something that is easy to put up. You don't have to change headsails as such. It's easy to put up, and you can carry on sailing. So that sails great. Its downside is that you're not going to sail as deep downwind. If you're trying to get downwind, that's where as a general with a code 0, cruising code 0, as I said, every boat's slightly different, but if we said you're in 16 knots of breeze, something like that, you might be able to sail maybe down to 145 true wind angle, but that's probably about the deepest you'll get, give or take a little bit. That's where you're sort of you're cruising through asymmetric, whatever. There's a number of names we call them now. That's where that comes into, and I think for that sort of sub 15 knot weather, to get yourself sailing generally downwind in downwind directions, it's a great sail. Short-handed, again, when it's all ready, steady and nice, it's still going to be a big sail. I mean, it'll be the biggest sail.
When you're talking about code 0 and gennaker, is it the same, or gennaker is a bit smaller?
Yeah, all sailmakers seem to have created about 5 different names for everything nowadays. I think it's the honest, like having a vang or a kicker.
Because my understanding was that you have code 0, and then you have the asymmetric spinnaker, and in between you have the gennaker.
So you could flip it slightly in what we'd say is you sort of have your gennaker is almost is a relatively flattish asymmetric. So we would call it a reaching kite, and then you'd have a running kite. You could have a running asymmetric and a reaching asymmetric. And a running type asymmetric won't reach very well. There's a lot of shape in the sail, and the whole idea is you're trying to get it to project out, so that helps you sail downwind. The reaching sail, you think about the apparent wind is generally going to be on the beam, or maybe even something. So you're sort of making a flatter shaped sail. Needs to definitely be a lot flatter coming out the back end, so that what you'll find on a full running sail is you sheet it in. If you're trying to reach with it, the back of the sail will sort of generally hook over.
So gennaker, you can reach more, right?
Yeah. So I mean, for you, I would say you would to go from top to bottom. Really, you've got your Yankee, but because we know the Yankee is not full size, but actually for short-handed sailing, it's perfect because it's easy for you to handle and this, that, and the other. That then when you come away from the wind, and we say we just use 10 knots of wind as a perfect example, we know with your Yankee and 10 knots of breeze, once we get to sort of 70 true or something like that, the boat's sort of starting to get a bit, we're not going anywhere.
Especially if there's a little bit of sea state.
Exactly, and you're sitting there going, well, that's no fun, and and we do need to get somewhere, so you either got to stop there because you don't want to turn the engine on, or you turn the engine on. That's where the code 0 comes in. That's your first sail you can get on. Suddenly it's just like putting a big gennaker up, and if you think of it like that as a real simple way, it's a big gennaker up, bang, off you go in 10 knots, and you'll be sailing, and and you'll be very happy.
Yeah.
But once in 10 knots, once you've probably got to 120 degrees true or something like that, roughly, maybe 125, then again it's starting to down itself, depower itself again. That's where that cruising asymmetric comes in, and then that's then keeps you going, and that works you down until and then if you go up the wind range, if that makes sense, all of those numbers are just basically dropping a little bit lower down the top. So you may be 80 and then 125, or a bit more, you may be 90, 130, and that's what you're doing up and down. The whole idea is just keeping the boat powered so that you've always got enough sail to sail with. Once you get to 20 knots, you probably say, well, I don't know, maybe you, but with 20 knots you might go, I don't need that great big spinnaker type thing up now, but we're sailing, we're wanting to sail dead downwind, bang, in comes your poled out your headsail and stuff again. And as you said, you'll go probably quite happily, easy to control with two people, and I think that, out of all of the sails, the one for two people to control, probably the hardest is probably the asymmetric, as the breeze gets up. Perfect sail for when it's like, but once it gets up, that's where you've got to start, you've got to be a little bit more sensible.
Yeah, we were thinking like an A2 for like light winds,
Yeah, I mean, I would say what we, generally, as I said, this is where again you hear numbers. You hear A1.5, A2, A3, A4. Generally, as a rule of thumb, the even numbers are running sails, and the odd numbers are more reaching sails. So an A5 is usually quite a heavy airs reacher, an A3 is a medium airs reacher, an A1 is a light reacher. You now get an A1.5, which is sort of a mix between the two, because especially nowadays lighter boats basically sail at angles downwind. So we call it a VMG kite, really, and that. So it's a little bit tweaked. So there's a little bit of a hybrid between it. And sort of generally, what we would do for a cruising boat like this, where we want one sort of sail to do all or do as much as possible, we sort of, it's what we call a bit more of an AP type shape. So it doesn't have quite so much full round in it, so that basically, because an A2 for this is a big old sail. And the thing is, it's all well and good, but the problem is that sometimes if you're shorthanded, as you said, you go oversized, you actually stop using it, because actually you're sitting there going, oh, hang on a minute, it's got a bit full on this. What we're trying to do is just keep the boat going and making it easy to sail. So oversizing the sail can actually be, a detriment to it, because you go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not going to use it because it's thing. So you balance it, and obviously you want to be able to reach a little bit as well as just, if you design it specifically just to go running, if you're sailing along at 135, 140 on a nice sort of 8 knot day, you want the sail sort of to be able to perform on that as well. So you want to sort of, what we've done over time, and as all sail makers would have done, they would have designed and developed a shape of sail that works really nicely. It's also quite docile as well. You don't want a twitchy sail. Sometimes when you got race sails, sometimes depending on what it is, they may have a quite, as you're easing out, you're trying to get the front to curl over. What we wanted to do is, if it does curl over a bit, it doesn't collapse. We just want it to be steady and stable. Otherwise, that's no good building that for a short-handed person, because he ain't going to be trimming he or she won't be trimming the sheet every
put it up and put the wind vane on, and then off we go, right?
Absolutely. And that's what you've got to think about. The funny thing is, though, what I would say is that don't get too into making it too small, because interestingly, that can actually be worse, because if you make it too small, you can't actually put enough shape in it, so the actual sail does become unstable. If you think about it, so there's, like we have, I know our designers have, we'll obviously have the length of your mast and how far the bows are at, and we will have a percentage system that we use. Say 1 point something % of this and this and this gives us the area that we would work around. When we sort of try and keep within those boundaries when we're doing it, because if we go outside of it, then the sail can get a bit twitchy. So again, this is where hopefully the advice from the sailmaker, if they've got the right information, and having the information in the first place.
Because now we have a symmetrical spinner on the boat, and it's like 210 square meters. It's massive, yeah. So we only put it up when we are like a fully crewed, right?
Yeah.
And even with fully crewed, it's just sweating bullets, right? If we get a gust,
yeah.
So we sailed it from Bermuda to Canada, and then with the Gulf Stream and everything, it can get really squally and things like that. So we sailed there, and then suddenly we got a lot of wind. So it's a monster to dose.
And I think that's that is where the questions always comes with the short-handed stuff, especially when you got to boats of sort of this size and more. Is that they are big sails, and so to control them, when you're short-handed is and actually they also can be quite heavy. So just physically moving the sails around and getting them up and down,
take a lot of space also.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where that sort of balance sort of comes with what you want to do within the within your sailing program of how it's going to fit. As I said, you don't want two of them, put it that way. You want sort of, hence why an AP style of sail is much better than having a runner or this, because you want it something that you can sort of use in as many different areas as you can. And then, so that again, you're not carrying 5 sails or 6 sails and stuff around in the boat, because they all take up space.
They do indeed,
So every sail that we sort of hopefully can create can try and do as many jobs pretty well, if that makes sense. It won't be absolutely stunning, but it will be a really high percentage, but basically you'll be able to use it over a wider area, and then that makes it become more versatile, which means you will use it more.
You got it as on a self-tailer, right? No,
on a furler.
For a self-furler, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You also provide that, or
we do all that. I mean, my time before I was in the sailmaking world, I used to work in the rigging business, and actually the company I worked for, we used to distribute one of the products, and so I did a huge amount of work, and that was a product called Carver, which is a French-based but they just make beautiful furlers, and actually it's really important, at the end of the day, when you want to furl the thing, you want it to furl. And,
because Code Zero, as you said, is a big sail, no?
Yeah. But if it furls nicely, and as I said, that makes it work, and But funnily enough, what I would say, I mean, you'll hear now. There's within the Code Zero game now. There's a few different versions you keep hearing. So you hear the word cableless is been a sort of a latest trend.
Okay.
So the original trend of the Code Zero was, as I said, it was very much like a genoa. It was a relatively straight luff, and you'd have a cable that would go up the luff of the sail. And we call it an anti-torsion cable or torsion cable. And that idea being is that when you turn the furler, that torsion turns the sail, helps turn the sail at the top, so that the sail will furl up. So that was the original way of doing it, and then out has come many different names for it now. But
top down, no?
No. Well, there's the cableless was an idea. It actually sort of really. I mean, this is how I see it. I mean, it may not have been true, but when it did come out, it was all about actually the IRC racing rule was that basically to have a race Code Zero to rate as a spinnaker, the half width had to be 75% or more. Now, obviously, that meant that you have to have a big sort of roach on the back of the sail, and what you'd see is often you'd see the sails flapping on the back, and that's just because they've had to put the roach in the back of the sail to make the sail measure. So by having a cableless sail, what they were trying to do was create a positive luff in the sail, and by doing that meant it brought the girth measurement back in at the back end. Okay. Thus, you could, like your genoa, you'd have a nice hollow in a genoa. You're not going to get to that point, but the point is, it was made. And the whole idea was that then it was very cleverly in ways that it could also project out the front slightly as well. thus projecting the sail out and giving a slightly wider range of angle to sail with the sail. What do I think of now? Well, honestly, I think both sides work. I think the trust of the cable in the sail, my personal view is I think that makes the sail last a bit longer, because the load of the furling is taken much more on the cable, shall we say, rather than the actual material of the sail.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas the cableless type sails, with the way that they've either created it with the panelling and this, that, and the other, there is more load that goes into the cloth. It does work, and it can create things. For cruising, it's a 50-50 conversation, and again, it's one of those conversations you have to have with. But my personal view now is, price wise, everyone thinks, we're not having the cable, so actually it makes the sail less money, but actually the extra fibing and things that they have to do with the luff of the sail, that sort of outweighs the cost of the cable. So it isn't really a pricing thing, it's more about how it performs on your boat. So as a general, I'm always one that's careful, and basically we stick with what we know till we're 100% positive that something else is better. We know this works. We know that the ones that we've done make a big difference. So we probably, for our cruising sails at the moment, still stick with the cable option. Yeah. And those cables nowadays have come on so amazingly well that you can still snake the sail down and it will sit quite happily into a bag and this, that, and the other. So does it take up any more or less room than a cable? Is not a massive amount between the two. So we would probably still stick down the cabled route at the moment.
Okay.
What I would say was, when you get to a boat this size and then you're moving up, so there's sort of two different types of product for the cable. So sort of what I would say is up to sort of about 45 feet ish. I mean, again, it all gives and takes a little bit on the type of boat that you're doing it on. You can buy what we call it's as a rope product, so it basically comes off a rope reel, and you can terminate the ends of it, and that's what you use. It's a pretty good product. It works very well for that. As the luff lengths of the sails get longer, and that's actually what controls it more than the size of the boat, actually, in a way, you then have to start looking at basically the next level of product up, and that's much more of a custom produced cable, and that's so literally you have to give your physical dimensions, and then the cable is basically physically made to that length, so it's not something you just cut off a roll. They actually make it. Now those cables are amazing. Literally, you turn it at the bottom, and you may be within 2 turns at the bottom, it will be turning the top of your sail. The rope product on the same length, maybe 5 or 10 turns.
Oh wow!
So, but that heavily can jump the price of the cable up massively. But if you want it to perform, that's where and we do see this often now, that when you're in that sort of 45 upward market, and then maybe once you get to 65, so we say, the exponential cost relative to the size of the sail doesn't seem to be quite so different. Is that it's an interesting one where we come up against different sail makers, and certain sail makers maybe still trying to hang on using the rope product, and some of the other sail makers will have now moved to more of the, so you can get quite a in the price of the sail just because of that. And that's where you've got to trust the person you're talking to, and I think that's where it comes back to, is that my view for we are on the edge on this size of bait. It will work both ways, but we are on the edge. I know that there will be certain people who will probably say, yeah, we can definitely use the rope product. Certain people will say, no, definitely you need to use the more expensive product. And again, that is you having to build the trust with the person you're buying the stuff off to understand, and make sure they are understand. Ask the question. There we go. I mean, I'm telling you, ask the question for for this boat, whoever you were to speak to. You know, if you spoke to someone, you would ask a question.
No, but it's many times it was good for you if I asked questions to the other sailmakers, because then I will understand the difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that is massively important. I would absolutely, totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, I totally understand. You know, there is huge amounts of products out there on the market, and there are some very, very good sailmakers out in the market. You know, no one would never deny that, and and it is personal choice. And people, but what I would say, out of everything, is that make sure you ask questions to the guy, because you will then learn. You will know if he's making it up or he's actually. You know, you'll get that feeling. You know, and don't just go off a quote. Ask questions and ask them to explain why theirs is built. Yeah. A lot of sailmakers, they won't diss other sailmakers. We don't like, you know, that's not the way we should do business. But get them to tell them why their sail, what they do to build their sail, and why they build it the way they do. Just try and get more of an understanding, and by doing that, hopefully you will work out, actually, those guys do seem to know what they're talking about, or hang on a minute, that one seems to be just reading off a sheet or something like that.
Yeah, you know? Made somewhere in Poland, yes. So, big differences on the cloth that you use for these sails?
Yes, I mean, again, you know, there are your sort of four main brands of cloth builders. You know, when you listen to these things, you'll have Dimension Polyod. That's one. You've basically got Challenge sailcloth. You've got Contender, and you've got Bainbridge. And really, those are the four main manufacturers of sailcloth. You know, they all have their own brands. They all have their differences. And again, this can get confusing when you're looking at, you know, I want a Dacron sail. Okay, that's fine. Such and such will give you a DP Sea Breeze. Some Contender will give you Contender AP. And what I would say as a general is that everyone looks at them and you'll see they'll give you a weight. Say an AP will come at 7.38. DP's version of whatever they're doing might be 7.69 or something like that. What I would say as a general is that if it says it's a 7 something, it's a 7 ounce sail. If it's an 8 something, it's an 8 ounce sail. Just to give you some idea, at least some way of, because I mean we have it where someone says, well, he's 0.69, you're 0.38. You know, obviously now that cloth might be better, and I'm not going to say it isn't, but the point is actually, as a general, when we're looking at it, with an ounce within weights in those things, and that way makes, it's easier to understand rather than sitting there getting blown away by all these point somethings. Don't worry about that. 7 ounce, 8 ounce, 9 ounce, 10. As long as they're sort of at least quoted, at least if you've got your one thing that's got correct, you know, so something there. If you see someone that's quoted an 8 ounce and everyone else has quoted a 10 ounce. I would suggest probably that the 8 ounce guy's got it wrong. Yeah. You know, if you've seen, you know. Likewise, ask the question. If you get a quote and the other one's at 9 ounce and you're at 10 ounce, there will be a difference in price because of it. But what I would do is go back to the people and say, can you confirm why you've used this weight of cloth? You know, they may know something different to the other guy, but at least you understand why. And I think that's, you know. And what I would say is also read more than the first 3 lines of the quote. Yes. Because usually the detail part's a bit lower down.
Good, yes. Yeah, because I think I didn't read more than 3 lines anyway. Because I got it before we left Soras, So you sent us a quote for... Thank you to John for his time. At the time of posting this video, we are still contemplating which downwind sails to add to our sail inventory. We are leaning towards twin head sails and a cruising asymmetric spinnaker. What would you go for?